Well, I first got interested in philosophy when I was very little. I discovered really early on that I was interested in time. So we'd be driving down the road. My dad was a photographer, and we would go to ghost towns in Colorado, and he would go there and take pictures of abandoned buildings. And we'd be driving along, and I'd be sitting there looking out the window, and the telephone poles would come along, and I'd say, okay, we're going to pass it now. And then as soon as we got past it, it wasn't now anymore. And so it was like now kept coming, and I thought, well, when is now? I can't figure out when now is. So I got really, really interested in time because of that. So I often think when I'm teaching to talk about how I got interested in philosophy is a good way to get my students interested, not because they're going to have the same experiences or anything like that, but because by telling them the story, I'm telling them how a human being, me, gets interested in philosophy. And then they start thinking about kinds of weird thoughts they might have had themselves like that. And it makes them think about what philosophy might mean to them. And I've actually had students come up to me when I've told the story about the telephone poles and say, I had the same thing happen. Philosophy is a real challenge because it's really abstract. And so you have to kind of try and bring it down to personal experience in some way. Try and figure out why people would be curious about the kinds of questions that philosophers are curious about. And so one way that I've done that is I've introduced discussions of sexism and racism into the class. These are issues that we're worried about now in contemporary society. And we read contemporary concerns about racism and sexism. During the Obama election, a lot of the media had subtle racism in it. We looked at that. We looked at the critical thinking class about this, and also an intro to philosophy. I was dragging. It was 2008, 2009, and I had been here since 1992, and I'd done a lot of things here, and I was pretty worn out. And I was kind of dragging, and I was figuring, well, how am I going to get through the rest of my career here? It's a lot of work, and I'm really tired. And I decided to apply for study abroad. And I went with a group of students to Oxford. And first of all, the classes were really small, and it reminded me how important it is to interact with students one-on-one. And you can do that in bigger classes, but I'd kind of forgotten how to do that. And I had kind of fallen back into lecturing. And lecturing is, it's funny because lecturing is actually the easy way to teach, because you just talk. And you don't have to pay attention to whether students are understanding you or anything like that. You just talk. So I'd kind of fallen back into lecturing because it's just easier. And I couldn't really do that in the smaller classes and study abroad. And plus, the students were having all these new experiences because most of them had never been abroad before. And even though it seems like, well, it's England, they speak English, it's not that different, it's really different. And so they were exploring all these new things, and they wanted to bring it back into the classroom, and they wanted to talk about it. And so I got to know them much more intimately than I had been getting to know my students. So when I came back, I was completely re-energized. And this idea that working with students in smaller groups really was what worked better was something that I thought, well, I've got to figure out how to do this in the classroom now. And so my first class back was a great big class. It was in the new IT building, and it was in 117. The room actually wasn't finished yet, and they put us in there because they wanted to open the building. So we were in that room, and that room is not conducive to group work because the seats are all fixed. It's basically an auditorium room. I didn't care. I had my students working in groups anyway. I actually sort of discovered a new way of teaching where I would go from group to group to group. And then I'd stop and then have the group share out to the other groups. And this doesn't sound like really new, innovative teaching. This is really what most people who are coming out of graduate school now are doing when they come into the classroom. But for me, it was new. And I really got that from getting re-energized and working with students in study abroad. That was such an amazing experience.